go back to one specific one because you have a lot of gambling stories that are well known, but this is the one that resonates with me. The game that was set up with Raymond Floyd when he came out to West Texas, and then Titanic Thompson came as well.
I did not know who Ty was. I learned and I know his history now. I know him pretty well, and I spent some time with him, so I knew. After he watched me play, he wanted me to travel with him, and he wanted to stick me in the caddy barn. In other words, and that's when he goes and picks a caddy. He says, I'll pick a caddy as my partner, and we'll play you two guys. And that's just what he did.
When Lee Trevino says someone is broke now, you better believe the story behind it is darker than anyone wants to admit. The man who came from the hustling circuits of Texas just dropped names that will make you question everything you thought you knew about golf's so-called golden era. This wasn't some casual observation from a retired player. This was a confession from someone who lived inside the system and watched it destroy people. While television cameras showed you a gentleman's game with handshakes and polite applause, behind the locker room doors, some of the biggest names in history were drowning in a gambling addiction so severe that millions of dollars vanished into thin air. We're not talking about friendly weekend bets. We're talking about a pathological compulsion that compromised the financial stability of players who should have been set for life. Trevino didn't just witness this underground economy. He lived it, he participated in it, he lost money because of it. And the players he named weren't small-time hustlers. They were legends whose faces you've seen on every golf highlight reel, whose swings you've tried to copy at the driving range, whose careers you've admired without knowing the truth. These icons weren't just playing for trophies. They were betting fortunes on themselves, losing focus, destroying their finances, and turning the sport into something far uglier than the polished image the tour wanted you to see. If you're someone who loves when the real story finally breaks through the surface, when the truth cuts through decades of carefully crafted public relations, then this is exactly the kind of content you need to see more of. Use the hype feature right now and give this video some hype. It helps us bring you more stories that the golf world would rather keep buried. Let's dig into the names Trevino called out, starting from the bottom of this dark list and working our way to the player whose addiction cost him everything. Number 5, Bobby Jones. Yes, that Bobby Jones. The one they named a tournament after. The one whose legacy is supposed to represent everything pure about the sport. The amateur who refused to turn professional because he believed golf should be about honor, not money. The man who founded Augusta National and created the Masters. That's the story they sell you. But Trevino's list includes Jones as someone deeply involved in the gambling culture that fueled the tour during his era. This wasn't some casual weekend bet with friends. The research shows that icons like Jones were part of a secondary economy that ran parallel to the official prize money. High-stakes speculation was the norm, not the exception. For someone who built his entire reputation on being above the commercial side of golf, the fact that Jones participated in this culture reveals a contradiction that the sport has never properly addressed. The gentleman amateur was still a gambler, and once you know that, the entire narrative around his legacy shifts. It doesn't erase his talent, it doesn't take away his major championships, but it does force you to ask what else about that golden era was a performance designed to protect the sport's image. The betting wasn't just recreation, it was pathological, and Jones was part of it, whether the history books want to admit it or not. Number 4, Ben Hogan, the man with the perfect swing, the ice-cold competitor who never smiled on the course, the grinder who rebuilt himself after a near-fatal car accident and came back to dominate the sport. Hogan's dedication to practice is the stuff of legend. Hours on the range until the sun went down. Thousands of balls hit until his hands bled. That obsession with perfection extended into his gambling habits. According to the research, Hogan used practice round stakes and hustling to simulate major championship pressure. He believed that betting real money during practice was the only way to replicate the mental strain of competing when it truly mattered. On the surface, that sounds almost noble, a professional using every tool available to sharpen his game. But what it really reveals is that even the most disciplined player in history couldn't separate his craft from the thrill of the wager. Hogan established what the research calls the betting to win mentality. It became a standard on the tour. If Hogan was doing it, everyone else felt justified doing it too. The problem is that not everyone had Hogan's discipline. Not everyone had his ability to control the psychological pressure. For some, the gambling became bigger than the golf, and that's where careers started to fall apart. Hogan might have managed it, but his influence helped create an environment where addiction thrived. You can't talk about golf's gambling problem without acknowledging that one of the sport's greatest champions helped normalize it. Number 3, Jack Nicklaus, the Golden Bear. 18 major championships, a career so dominant that people still debate whether anyone will ever match it. Nicklaus is supposed to be the standard for greatness in this sport, the measuring stick every player is compared against, the model of consistency and excellence. But Trevino's list puts Nicklaus right in the middle of the gambling culture, not as a victim, but as an active participant. The research describes Nicklaus as participating in inner circle betting. This wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't something fans saw or reporters wrote about. It was kept within elite groups, managed risk among the best players in the world. The fact that Nicklaus was involved reinforced gambling as a tour standard in ways that went far beyond his own personal behavior. When the greatest player of all time is betting, when the man with more major championships than anyone in history treats gambling as normal, it sends a message to everyone else that this behavior is acceptable. It becomes part of the culture. The younger players see it, the rising stars see it, and they assume it's just what you do when you reach that level. Nicklaus managed his risk. He didn't lose everything like some of the others on this list. He didn't let gambling compromise his performance. But his participation gave legitimacy to a system that destroyed other careers. It's easy to look at Nicklaus and say he handled it responsibly, but responsibility isn't the point. The point is that his involvement helped create an environment where gambling became so embedded in the tour that players who couldn't handle it had no way to escape. Nicklaus didn't cause the problem, but his presence in those betting circles made it worse for everyone who didn't have his control. Number 2, Lee Trevino himself. This is where the story gets personal. This is where the man calling out the gambling culture has to confront his own role in it. Trevino didn't just observe the addiction, he was consumed by it. In 1982, Trevino placed a $500,000 bet on himself, $500,000, on a single performance. Think about that number. At the time, a prize money for winning a major championship was far less than that. Trevino was risking more on himself than he could win in purse money alone. Even by the standards of the tour's underground economy, this was considered insane. Trevino tried to keep the wager secret, but news like that doesn't stay quiet for long in the tight-knit world of professional golf. The golfing community found out, and the reaction was immediate. People thought he had lost his mind. Betting that much money on yourself doesn't just add pressure, it fundamentally changes the entire nature of competition. You're no longer just trying to win a tournament for glory and prize money. You're trying to redeem a financial decision that could destroy you if it goes wrong. The psychological weight of that bet followed Trevino into the 1983 Masters. He struggled. The pressure to make good on the wager interfered with his technical execution. Major championships require total focus. You can't be thinking about money while you're standing over a crucial putt. But that's exactly what Trevino was dealing with. Every shot carried the weight of that $500,000 decision. The research makes it clear that this bet contributed to his decline at that event. He didn't just lose a tournament, he lost capital, he lost focus, and he paid the price in his performance. Trevino came from the caddy yards and the hustling circuits of Texas. Gambling was part of his DNA long before he ever made it to the tour. But even for someone who grew up in that world, even for someone who understood the risks and knew how to handle pressure, a $500,000 bet was a step too far. The fact that Trevino is the one calling out this culture now, decades later, shows you how damaging it was. He knows the cost because he paid it himself. He knows what gambling can do to your career because he watched it happen to his own game in real time. Number 1, Sandy Lyle. And here's where the thumbnail text makes perfect sense. He's broke now, or at least he was broke for a long time because of what gambling did to his life. Lyle is the most extreme example of how this addiction destroyed someone who should have had everything. Sandy Lyle won the Masters. He won the Open Championship. He reached the pinnacle of professional golf. Those victories should have defined a career of wealth and security. Major championships are supposed to set you up financially for life. Prize money, endorsements, appearance fees, corporate outings. Winning 2 majors should mean you never have to worry about money again. Every door in golf should open for you. But Lyle lived a dual life. On one side, he was an exceptionally gifted golfer, achieving the sport's highest honors. On the other side, he was a gambling addict who couldn't stop betting on his own performance. The research is brutal in its assessment. Lyle frequently wagered on himself, and this wasn't smart money management or calculated confidence. This was self-defeating behavior. Every time he bet on his own round, he added psychological pressure that made it harder to perform. The weight of money on the line destroyed his focus. Over a 9-year period, Lyle's losses exceeded $2.2 million. Let that number sit with you. $2.2 million lost. Not spent on houses or cars or investments, lost to gambling. The research describes it as financial hemorrhaging. For Lyle, golf stopped being about glory. It became a high-stakes mechanism for risk. And the cruelest part? He always lost anything he wagered on. Always. No matter how talented he was, no matter how much he practiced, the gambling made it impossible for him to succeed when money was on the line. The pressure became too much. His focus collapsed. And his career, which should have been defined by those 2 major victories, became defined by financial ruin. Lyle's story is the ultimate cautionary tale. It doesn't matter how good you are if you can't control the addiction. Talent means nothing when the psychological weight of your bets is crushing you every time you step onto the course. Trevino knew about Lyle. Everyone on the tour knew, but nobody stopped it. The culture allowed it to continue until Lyle had nothing left. And this is where the story connects to something even uglier. Because gambling wasn't the only dark truth hiding behind the golden era's polished image. While players like Lyle were destroying themselves financially, others were using psychological warfare to gain advantages they couldn't earn through skill alone. Enter Raymond Floyd, the man known for the stare, the enforcer. At 81 years old, Floyd looks back at this era with pure cynicism. While the public saw heroes, Floyd saw frauds, men who used unethical tactics to overcome their weaknesses, and he's not holding back anymore. Floyd watched players like Severiano Ballesteros turn golf into a street fight. Ballesteros was celebrated as a magician of the short game, but Floyd calls him a fraud on the ethical plane. The miraculous cough. That's what Floyd calls it. Ballesteros would develop a sudden dry cough that occurred precisely when an American opponent was in the middle of their backswing. This wasn't a medical condition. It was tactical. During the 1991 Ryder Cup at Kiowa Island, known as the War on the Shore, Ballesteros used this tactic against Fred Couples on the second tee. Floyd was Couples' playing partner, and Floyd didn't just let it slide. He dug an elbow into Ballesteros' ribs and issued a direct threat. The cough ends now, or things escalate beyond the etiquette of the course. For Floyd, this was proof that the gentleman's sport had become something far uglier. Ballesteros also practiced his putting in the direct line of sight of opponents. He made baseless accusations about illegal equipment to rattle other players. These weren't mind games. They were violations of the social contract that golf was built on. And it wasn't just Ballesteros. Nick Faldo took a different approach, the silent treatment. Faldo refused to speak to or acknowledge his playing partners. He treated them like furniture. Floyd argues this was a calculated weapon designed to kill the human element of competition. You're supposed to beat someone with your game, not by pretending they don't exist. Then there's Gary Player, the fitness icon, the man who built a brand around discipline. But the locker room whispers tell a different story. Rumors of moving balls in the rough, accidentally grounding clubs in hazards, rule bending that's impossible to prove but corrosive to a player's reputation. Floyd's view is binary. You either have integrity or you're a fraud. And he believes too many legends were built on convenient interpretations of the rules. Floyd also tears into the World Golf Hall of Fame, calling it a joke. His target? The one major wonders. Players like Fred Couples, who Floyd believes don't belong in a Hall of Fame that once meant something. Couples has one major, the 1992 Masters, 15 PGA Tour wins. For Floyd, who was inducted in 1989 with 4 majors and 62 professional wins, Couples' inclusion in 2013 was an insult. Floyd's standard is clear. A Hall of Famer should have a minimum of 2 majors, or 1 major and 40 wins. He refuses to vote for players he considers unworthy. Being a nice guy or a fan favorite doesn't make you a legend. It makes you a beneficiary of a system that lowered its standards for television ratings. The institution prioritized popularity over performance, and for Floyd, that decision validated everything wrong with modern golf. So where does this leave us? The golden era wasn't golden. It was volatile. It was ugly. It was defined by addictions that wrecked careers, psychological tactics that violated the sport's integrity, and institutional decisions that rewarded popularity instead of greatness. The heroes weren't all heroes. Some were frauds. Some were addicts. Some bent the rules and got away with it because their talent was undeniable. And the sport looked the other way because protecting the image mattered more than protecting the truth. But here's the thing. Knowing this truth doesn't destroy the history. It corrects it. It forces us to remember that greatness should be about more than winning. It should be about how you win. The manner matters as much as the outcome. The lesson from Trevino's list and Floyd's critiques is simple but profound. Integrity matters. Talent without integrity is just performance, and performance without honor is hollow. The game can recover from this dark chapter. It can remember what made it unique among professional sports, but only if we stop sanitizing the past and start acknowledging the difference between a champion and someone who just survived long enough to collect the trophy. Sandy Lyle's story should haunt every young player who thinks gambling adds excitement to competition. Lee Trevino's $500,000 bet should serve as a permanent warning about the dangers of mixing money with performance. And the tactics of Ballesteros, Faldo, and others should remind us that the social contract of respect isn't optional. It's everything. Golf survived this era, but it didn't survive unchanged. The sport lost something during those decades, a piece of its soul, and the only way to get it back is to be honest about what happened and refuse to let it happen again. If this story changed how you see golf's history, if learning about the dark side of the golden era made you rethink everything you thought you knew, hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the truths the sport doesn't want told, the stories that get buried under decades of carefully managed public relations. And drop a comment below. Out of all the names on Trevino's list, Sandy Lyle, Lee Trevino himself, Jack Nicklaus, Ben Hogan, or Bobby Jones, who do you think was most affected by the gambling culture? Who paid the highest price? Let's talk about it in the comments. Because these stories matter more than you might think. And the more we understand the past, the better we can protect the future of the game we love.